Good morning, everyone. We'll get started in just a couple of moments. Thanks for joining us for our special webinar today on nonprofits navigating through the impacts of the virus. And thank you for everyone joining us. We'll get started in just a moment. Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Garrett Sheehan. I'm President and CEO of the Greater New Haven Chamber of Commerce and Quinnipiac Chamber of Commerce. We have a great webinar session for you today. We're talking about loans, grants, fundraising, everything you need to know as it deals with the impacts from the coronavirus, especially for nonprofits. We have a large panel, but that means lots of experts who are willing to share their advice today. And I should say before I introduce them that we want to take your questions as they come up. You can put them into the chat box or the Q&A box. As we go through, I'll interject those to each of our presenters. They have topics they're going to cover, and I'll try to make sure we get the right questions to them. Once we get through the entire presentation, we'll answer all questions that are out there. And if there's any that we can't get to during the session today, we'll try to follow up on those. So today, our agenda, we're going to start with the legalities of remote board management. Tom Sansone with Carmody, Torrance, Sandeck, and Hennessy. He's a nonprofit volunteer as well. Community Fund, that is going to be Allie Fox with United Way of Greater New Haven. Jackie Downing from the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven is going to talk about the Great Give. And then we're going to discuss grants and loans with Amber Tucker and with Joe Williams. And then how to protect employees, Nick Zano, also with Carmody. So with that, let me hand it over to Tom and we will get started. Tom, thanks so much for joining us.
And good morning, and thank you, Garrett, and thank you everyone who's joining us this morning. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here to speak with you all. And I understand that our audience will include both board members as well as nonprofit management and staffers. So my remarks are intended for both of you. And when we discuss the legalities of remote board management, we should begin with the somewhat broader topic of the best utilization of board members during the pandemic, the unprecedented events that we are experiencing now. Certainly, all nonprofit management and staff should view their board of directors as a potentially large asset. It should be a large asset for you. It should be the go-to group that you are looking to provide expertise. It's highly unlikely that any of your board members have had tremendous expertise in dealing with the effects of a worldwide pandemic, but there is a good chance that a lot of them have dealt with issues involving crisis management and managing finances during critical periods. And that is something that you shouldn't hesitate to call upon them to provide for you at this point. As board members, we're willing to do that. We want to do that. We recognize the predicament that all nonprofits face, and we want to do the best that we can as good board members to serve you. Also, board members have extensive personal and professional networks, and those are something that should be utilized as well. So make sure that you tap into your board to see who they have by way of resources, not just financial, but also in-kind resources that may be available, IT type of support that they can provide, any sort of technical assistance. These are things that board members have at their disposal, and you shouldn't hesitate to call upon them to do that. Now, dealing with the legalities of remote board management, dealing with the new normal where we're all meeting virtually, we need to be mindful of the fact that board meetings should still be conducted, but they need to be conducted in accordance with the provisions of Connecticut law. And one of the most important things to be mindful of is the fact that under Connecticut law, a board of directors cannot take a vote unless it is actually undertaking a meeting process. Now, the meeting doesn't have to be face-to-face. It could be virtual, like the type of meeting we're having now. It could be telephonic. The only requirement that really comes into play is that all of the board members, all of the participants to the meeting have to be able to hear one another so that any action that they take can be considered official and legitimate. And if you think about it, the reason why boards meet is because we're trying to share our collective knowledge, the wisdom that we have, the perspectives that we bring to the topic at hand is what's so important in conducting board business. And you lose that if you try to conduct a meeting by email and just ask for people to vote a particular way on an initiative or a motion or a measure that management is considering. So understand that that type of action is actually not permitted under the Connecticut General Statutes, because in an electronic mail situation, you aren't able to hear one another. And therefore, it's important that you make the opportunity available for people to meet virtually, whether it's through Zoom or WebEx or Cisco or any of the other various platforms that we're all learning about and all using extensively now. And if all else fails, a conference call telephonically will suffice under those circumstances. There is one exception to this rule, and that is a corporation through its board of directors can act without a meeting if it executes something known as a unanimous corporate consent. But as the term suggests, it has to be unanimous, which means that every board member has to physically sign off on the consent, on the resolution that is being put forth. And that can be more unworkable or more unwieldy than even trying to have a virtual meeting. So unless it's something that is so ministerial and so mundane that you don't need to have a full, robust discussion among your board members, I would not recommend using unanimous corporate consents as an alternative to a board meeting. Now more than ever, it's critical that your board meet, confer with you, and provide their collective wisdom and advice so that you can best run your operation. Because we're all doing our work remotely, the one other thing I want to mention is that as board of directors members, we have a duty of confidentiality. We are obliged to provide as much effort as we can muster to make sure that the privacy and confidentiality of the information, particularly the financial information that we become privy to, is maintained in a manner that it is not public. So with that in mind, I would just remind everyone as an important practice tip, if you're working from home, if you're working virtually, make sure that you keep the documentation that you're provided private. Don't leave it lying around the house on the dining room table. Don't leave it in the coffee shop where you might be happy to, be trying to pick up a quick cup of coffee. Make sure that you're doing everything you can to safeguard the privacy of that information. And with that, I'll turn it back to Garrett. And if anyone has any questions, please feel free to use the chat box.
Great, thank you, Tom. And every once in a while, the slides freeze up here, so excuse me for a minute. But I believe we have going next is that Allie?
Mm-hmm.
Great, Allie, why don't you start and I will get your slide up once I get this unfrozen.
Right, the joys of technology. I'm having my own, aha, there we go. I don't know what you just did, but that allows me to see my co-panelists. Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. I hope this finds you enjoying a welcome of sunshine today. Pleased to be here and really share a little bit about the new funds that the Community Foundation of Greater New Haven and United Way of Greater New Haven, that our teams have come together, and it has been an incredible experience and one that I'm very honored to be a part of. And we have felt and heard and been a part of so many issues that have come up as a result of COVID, and wanting to be responsive to our neighbors, to our community members. And so we launched this Greater New Haven COVID-19 Community Fund, I would say maybe two-ish weeks ago. And in that time, we have reached out to many organizations that have been partners with both of our organizations, or either one of our organizations, and really trying to be responsive in this moment in time, knowing that every day this has been changing. And even from when we first started having conversations a couple of weeks ago, that things have changed dramatically since then. So the intention of this first round of the fund, we came together and really looking at what are the most emergency issues around basic needs. So looking at those who are experiencing homelessness, those who are economically disadvantaged, our seniors, folks with disabilities, and really looking at how do we, through our partnerships with community organizations, how do we make sure that our neighbors are getting the support that they need in this crisis. And so we have just, as of yesterday, had our first round, and we anticipate that there will be many phases of this funding, again, to be responsive to the needs as they show up and change and evolve. This first phase, as I mentioned already, really focused on food, shelter and housing, health, social services, and utilities. And so that's really been our focus. And we know that both of our organizations, we have larger portfolios of funding in our before coronavirus days, but this was really the focus that we wanted to have right now. So I'll move to the next slide, please, Garrett. So in terms of the funds that we have available right now, around 1.5 million, very different. 1.5 million has been raised already, and we have fundraising efforts that are underway with both Community Foundation and United Way that will continue to add to that pot. It has not been a process that it hasn't been an online application process, and I think that's something really important to name. I think when folks have read the stories in the newspapers, they're excited about the opportunity, and really in this first round, we have been proactively reaching out to organizations that we know from our relationships with them over the years that have needs and have a strong track record with us. So at this point in time, we are not accepting unsolicited applications, so it's important to note. The range of the awards, yesterday we have a committee made up of 3 current and former board chair members for each of the Community Foundation as well as United Way. There's a staff team of 4 that from both agencies that have really been doing some of the design work of the tools and the questions and the surveys. And then of course, the broader staff teams of both organizations have been very much a part of this and having these conversations. But for this first round, yesterday we had our committee meeting to review recommendations, and the first round of awards have been between the ranges of 5,000 to 40,000. It's important to note that that may evolve. Again, looking at how the needs will evolve, we're considering what kinds of funding resources may be available on a state or federal level, and how that impacts. We don't want to duplicate funding sources or to duplicate funding for a particular thing if we know the state or federal sources may be able to support that. And again, really trying to complement what is out there already. Pleased to share with this group, and this is the first public space that this has been shared, but there will be press releases that will be going out shortly. Over 600,000 was approved to be awarded to organizations in this first round yesterday. So that's huge. We hope it will make a significant impact in our community, and we're really proud and honored to be a part of that. I think that's the last bullet there is what I've been saying along, that we want to be flexible, we want to be nimble, we really want to listen to the needs of our partners. Some of the themes, and you can jump to the next slide, please, Garrett. Some of the themes have been around staffing. So a lot of agencies either needing to expand their services or repurpose their services, like operating in a virtual world, or just in the example of shelters, in the example of food pantries, the increased need of staff as we see an increased need in those areas. There were themes around supply requests, so food supplies, PPE, cleaning supplies, diapers, those kinds of things. Facility needs, so in thinking about some of the spaces and having deep cleaning procedures done in order to protect our clients, the partners of our client, or the clients of our partners, excuse me, to make sure that we are operating in as healthy conditions as possible. And then also, especially in the area of social services, meeting clients' individual emergency needs. And so some of the partners that have, relationships with community members and really have the closest pulse on needs for medicine, food, rent, and utilities. And so trying to make sure that the agencies that have those connections are able to support residents directly. And then one of the biggest themes, and this, I'm sure this isn't a shock to anyone, is technology. And so looking at how to switch to operating in a virtual landscape. And that's everything from having staff having additional phones, laptops, Zoom accounts, you name it, and also the training and support to allow their staff to really operate in a new way. So those are some of the themes and some of the things that were funded. And again, that may evolve as we go week by week. So that is an overview of where we're at in this moment, and happy to also take any questions that come up. So thank you.
Great, thanks, Ellie. Let me turn now to Jackie Downing with the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven. And I should mention as well, this entire program is put on by our nonprofit resource council, which is presented by Mosaic. And so we appreciate their support, and the steering committee that helped pull this entire program together, of which Jackie is a part. So Jackie, talk to us about the Great Give.
Okay, thank you, Garrett. We're actually really excited that the Great Give turned out to be at just the right time. But we have gone through a major renovation. We've taken 6 months of planning and turned it on its head in the last 10 days to make it more responsive to what the current needs are of the organization. So if your listeners are not familiar with the Great Give, it has been around for, this is its 11th year. It's a 36-hour online fundraising event. And we last year raised 1.87 million during that 36 hours, including the prizes that were awarded. We have right now about 370 organizations that are registered. Registration is still open. So if you're not part of the Great Give yet, it's a pretty simple registration process. You can go in until April 17th and still register for the Great Give. The event itself, as I said, is May 5th and 6th, 8 a.m. on May 5th to 8 p.m. on May 6th. And that's when we'll be doing some bonus hours and some mostly non-competitive prizes. We changed the structure quite a bit. So there will be random drawings during lunch hours, during happy hours, during the early morning as an early bird prize. We'll have an insomnia gift in the middle of the night. We have the gift closest to midnight, and some other prizes that can be won during those 36 hours. But because there was such great need in the community for more immediate funding, we spoke with the folks at GiveGab, which is our host, and we are opening the portal on April 6th. So it will be open on Monday. So if your nonprofit needs to do immediate fundraising, there are no incentives. We're not driving people to the site at this time, but you can use the portal from May 6th through April 6th through May 31st. So if you were setting up something with a peer-to-peer fundraiser, you get your board members to become your peer-to-peer fundraisers. They reach out to their friends. They haven't quite completed their goal by May 6th. It's okay. They can continue to raise money. Or if you haven't planned to do this and you're not ready to launch right away, you can wait until later to do that. So the functionality will stay open to May 31st. On the site, there's an amazing toolkit with 15-minute videos on how to use the peer-to-peer function, how to use the matching function. We have over $200,000 in matches and prizes from our sponsors, from the Community Foundation and from the Valley Community Foundation, as well as Bank of America, Key Bank, New Alliance Foundation, Branford and Guilford Foundations, and Liberty Bank. So those matches and prizes will be going out to certain organizations during. If we have any for-profits that are listening and you'd like to know how you can help, you can adopt your favorite nonprofit and create a match for them. Matches really inspire other donors. So if you were to give to your favorite nonprofit a matching incentive, they'd put that up on their profile and they'd send out your logo, your information to say, wow, I can get a match from this vendor of mine if I get a certain number of gifts. So that's a great way to get some publicity. It's also a great way to support the nonprofit that you love. If you don't have a particular nonprofit you want to do that for, we can at the foundation help create an overall arching organization list or the full event list where you can support everyone who's participating. The peer-to-peer and matching are really great functions. There is the toolkit that I talked about and the webinars to help. And this year, the stimulus package that was just passed had a line in it where $300 of donations in 2020 will be above the line on your tax return. So right now, most folks are not itemizing because of the standard deduction. But this year, donors will be allowed to put $300 above the line. So there is tax deductibility on $300. So there may be some people who are more inspired to give because of that tax deductibility. I wanted to make sure that we covered that. We do have a webinar coming up on April 7th at 11 o'clock. Use the Great Give in new ways for special events and campaigns. We know that many nonprofits have canceled fundraising events. I spoke with one who had to cancel 3 events that would have netted $50,000 in the last 2 weeks. So we are looking at creative ways to use the Great Give to do your gala. You can do it online. You can have table captains who are your peer-to-peer fundraisers, all kinds of different ideas on how to use the Great Give to replace those missing events. So there will be information going out shortly about that webinar on April 7th. You can listen in. It will also be recorded and posted in the toolkit. And we hope that we'll have more organizations join us for the Great Give. Thank you,
Great.
Garrett.
Thank you, Jackie. Appreciate it. Now we're going to be joined by Amber Tucker with FML CPAs and Joe Williams with the Connecticut SBDC. They're going to be talking about some of those stimulus programs that come in the form of both loans and grants that are available to nonprofits. It's the same programs that are out there for the for-profits. 501c3s can take advantage of those. So let me introduce Amber and Joe. Thanks a lot. Amber, I'll let you kick us off here.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Joe and I are gonna tackle this together, so I'm gonna let Joe go ahead and present some of the information, and then I'll add in some information that I've been receiving from nonprofits on specific questions that result from you.
Great, Joe.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Amber. Thanks, Garrett. First of all, I'd like to talk about the Paycheck Protection Program. As of Monday, after the CARES Act went into effect, we have looked at this, and I got word out of the White House as of yesterday. The lenders have received their instructions how to proceed forward. I know there's some misinformation, but this is the latest information. As of tomorrow, April 3rd, all small businesses and 501c3s, as well as sole proprietors, can actually apply for this flex fund. So if you have less than 500 employees, you can apply. Fortunately, no religious organizations. If only way a church, they have to have like a social organization involved, or they're a entity that, say, I give you an example. This came up yesterday on the SBA call. They were doing something like a food kitchen or something of that nature, or they were doing some social services, maybe had a daycare within their church. They are eligible to apply through the Paycheck program, as well as one of the other programs. The amount and the way you calculate this prior to February 15, 2020, that is the magical date, you should have one be in business and had a payroll. You basically would take 2.5% of your rolling payroll. And what is included in that, we're talking not only the payroll itself, but actual different insurances that go along with the payroll, taxes. That is how the SBA actually will calculate that and with the lender to do that. What's different about the PPP program versus the EIDL, which is actually the emergency loan, is that the bank themselves, your local bank, you have to apply to them directly. The applications are online, or you can go to your participating local SBA lender here in the state of Connecticut to apply, but you cannot do that and actually turn that document in until tomorrow. The process is actually very streamlined. You are going to be approved in one day as a part of the legislation. It will only take one day to actually get your approval done. Both of the loan funds will be disseminated in a week's time frame of the institution. One thing that has come up this morning was a question about the interest rate. All interest rate is at 0.05%, so less than 0.5% is the actual interest rate, and it's covered for a period of 2 years. With that, there is a deferment, minimum of 6 months, no greater than 1 year. The bank is allowed to defer the payment, principal, and interest of this particular program. So just be aware of that as well. So I encourage everyone to apply before the deadline, which is June 30th, 2020. So there is definitely a timeline on the Paycheck Protection Plan. So be aware of that. Also, in talking to some of the other nonprofits and some of the other small businesses that are affected by this, because the state of Connecticut is under a state of emergency and we are potentially not necessarily open until April 30th right now. And I've been advising some of my clients that as long as they get their application in, you should be mindful of that, because the way the PPP program works, you actually have to bring your employees back to work. So if you furloughed them or you laid them off, you're actually, the way the program works, you're going to go to the bank and fill out the form, they'll approve you in 1 day, funds will be sent to you within a week, but then you have to actually bring your employees and rehire them. That is what the information that I'm receiving. So anyone laid off between 2/15 and to 4/26 of this month, I would actually encourage you to wait, maybe not apply just tomorrow. If you're not really ready to go fully open, if you're ready to service the community, then you should definitely take advantage of the situation tomorrow as far as the PPP program is concerned. Just know your valuation, the way the banks and lenders are looking at you, they're taking the calculation over the 8 weeks period of time, and they're looking at your 990s for those businesses that file either a 1120 or a Schedule C for a small business. They're looking at 2018 if you have not applied your 219 taxes as of yet, inclusive of the PPP. When what uses you can utilize that for, it can be used for payroll as well as the benefits such as sick leave, rents, mortgages. In the mortgage, it only will cover the interest. It will not cover the principal payment of that mortgage. You can cover other debts such as utility bills and the like for that. That is what the PPP is actually for. The main purpose is to deal with replacement of your paycheck. In rehiring or bringing back your furloughed employees under the PPP plan, you must pay your employees a minimum of 75% of their wage. And there is a cap on those individuals in your organization that qualify. It is $100,000 or less that is actually covered under the PPP.
Okay, Joe, so I just want to clarify, they can obtain the application tomorrow on SBA.gov, and then they're going to bring that application to their bank.
They can actually apply to the bank officially as of tomorrow, April 3rd. That's what's in the act. So the application is out. You can go to the SBA's website. You can go to our website at ctspdc.com, We have a copy of the application there as well. If you have applied already to the emergency assistance loan, your loan officer will actually send you the Paycheck Protection Plan application instructions. Those individual businesses that have already served and they've already been approved in the last 2 weeks, they were immediately sent out as of Monday, the PPP application.
Great.
The Emergency Economic Injury Disaster Loan, what I've been calling the EIDL program, it's available to all 501c3s and any 501c6 organization under 500 employees. It does go up to $2 million in this fund, and you have all the way until December 31st. I encourage you not to wait that long, but you do have until December 31st to apply for that. This loan is not forgivable. There is a portion under the EIDL, which is the advance, what we're calling an advance grant, which when you apply for the EIDL disaster loan program, you need to check the box on the application page that says advance $10,000 grant. Once you do that, you're going to receive, I think this is like a 9 or 12 digit number beginning with the 3. And that tells you that your application has been received by the SBA and it's gone into review. In a matter right now, the SBA is a week and a half behind. They're actually approving all loans from the week of March 17th up until last Friday. So if you applied like yesterday or Monday, more than likely you will not hear from a representative until the latter part of next week right now. But once they reach out to you, within 3 days after that, and you've checked the box for the advance $10,000, you will receive the check deposit for Treasury within 3 days. So just be aware of that. Once again, though, unlike if you applied previous to Monday, what's happening with your application, you will have to resubmit as of Monday another application. You will not have to upload documents at this time. It only takes 10 or 15 minutes to actually request the advance as well as the injury disaster loan amount. Just be mindful, if you did apply before this Monday, you must go back to the website and apply again. If you do not do so, you will not receive the grant, because before Monday, the grant didn't exist under the first 2 stimulus packages. So this is the 3rd stimulus package that the actual grant portion of the CARES Act was actually implemented. You must go back in there. But I can tell you right now within New Haven of the companies, we are one of the first 3 states to actually receive approval to actually apply for funding, which is actually significant for our businesses because we're kind of on the top of the list versus the rest of the state of the union. So just be mindful of that. If you applied before Monday, you have to go back in to reapply, or your file is actually sitting and it's not being looked at. Once you go back in, you'll receive a loan number. Once you receive the loan number, a loan officer will get in contact with you either via email, and they are making personal phone calls. At that time, within that email, you're going to receive instructions on the documents they want you to upload and where to send them. What has been happening in the past, the system is crashing because of the amount of volume coming through the government websites. So to eliminate that, you're going to send the documents directly to your actual underwriter to streamline the process.
Okay. And one thing to add to that, you can apply for the EIDL advance and PPP. And what will happen is if you receive the $10,000 grant and you're approved for your PPP, when you receive your PPP payment, it'll just be reduced by that $10,000 advance that you received.
That is correct. And also if you receive the PPP as well as the EIDL, remember the PPP is really mainly for payroll issues, even though 25% of your total allocation under the PPP plan, you can actually use for bills, utilities, and other indebtedness. of your business or the nonprofit. So there's a cap there. It's 25% of the actual allocation of your payroll. But if you receive that, like Amber alluded to, you have the deduction of the $10,000 during that grant, the idea.
Right.
Great. Joe, do you want to just touch on the mid-sized business, and then we'll get to Nick and we'll come back with questions after we get through everyone.
Well, right now, it's like you said on the screen, it's a little bit how to apply is currently unknown. I am still waiting on instruction. Hopefully we'll get that either later today or tomorrow. Because under the act, every business is really able as of April 3rd. So I will be talking to Julio later today, the district director of the SBA here in Hartford, to get a better clarification. The White House has sent clarification on that, or through Treasury. But what it's looking to do is that the loan is to use to retain 90% of your staff. That's what the main function is actually used for. So we're talking about, it's more so you need to check the SBA's website for size standards. That is what the delay is actually, are they going to curtail or make some changes to the actual size standards that classify small business in America? Right now it's at 500, you know, it sometimes goes up to 1,000, sometimes it goes up to 10,000, depending on the actual size standard and by industry classification. So that's what everyone is trying to deal with in Washington. So we really don't have an answer yet, but as soon as we do, we'll definitely relay that information to Garrett and get that out to all the public.
Great. Let me turn now to Nick Zano, who is going to talk about some of the labor issues out there and how to protect your employees. Nick?
Good morning. Thank you, Garrett. So there's just two main things that I wanted to discuss this morning, hitting the high points for you and giving you some documents or references to documents that I think are important for every employer to have. The two main areas that I wanted to cover are protecting your employees and then also a summary of the FFCRA, the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. A document that I think is important for everyone to have is the CDC guidance for businesses on coronavirus issues in the workplace. And I think every employer's first or primary obligation is to provide a safe workplace and minimize exposure for employees as much as you reasonably can. I know that many of you are still operating and providing services to your clients, and employees are still coming to your workplace. It is important to demonstrate from a legal standpoint and from a moral standpoint that you are taking this issue seriously and you're providing guidelines for employees on how they can minimize their risk to contracting the virus. And so there are some guidelines on the PowerPoint that hopefully are obvious, and I'm not going to go through each one. The only one that I wanted to focus on is the very last one, send sick employees home. The CDC guidance provides symptoms for the virus, the main ones being, employees who exhibit a fever, a cough, or shortness of breath. I know some employers are doing temperature checks, and those have now been permitted by the EEOC in light of the fact that we are experiencing a pandemic. So some employers are doing temperature checks on their employees. If you do have an employee that is exhibiting symptoms, the advice from CDC obviously is to send that employee home and really not allow that individual to come back into the workplace unless they've either tested negative or from the CDC, at least 3 days have passed since they had a fever without taking any medications, and at least 7 days have passed since they first started exhibiting symptoms. So there are a number of other issues that have come up involving employees who aren't exhibiting symptoms, but a household member may be exhibiting symptoms, or a household member may have been exposed to the virus. My general advice on that is to err on the side of caution and, take steps to remove that individual from the workplace if there's any concerns about exposure. You should certainly be communicating with your employees about factual facts that are at your disposal about somebody being exposed and when and where they worked, but should not reveal their identity. So just some general guidelines. The CDC guidance is a great resource. And Garrett, next slide. The next topic that I wanted to cover is the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. And this is an enormous new law that was passed by Congress that is effective April 1st, yesterday, and continues through the rest of the year. It applies to all employers with less than 500 employees, and that includes nonprofit organizations. There are two main components to this law. One is an emergency paid sick leave, and the second is emergency family and medical leave, which also is paid as well. And the Department of Labor issued a poster that all of you should have and should post in the workplace and should distribute to employees who are working remotely. And that poster, it's a one-page document. If you go on the Department of Labor website, you'll find it. It provides, I think, a simple summary of this law. And just briefly, the paid sick leave part of the law provides for 80 hours of paid sick time to full-time employees in 2 weeks, or the equivalent of 2 weeks for part-time employees based on their regular schedule or their average work hours. There are 6 reasons why somebody can take paid sick leave. I'm not going to go through each one. It's in that DOL poster. What I will say is in the first 3 reasons of the 6, the employer, if an employee takes leave for one of those 3 reasons, the employer must pay full wages to that employee for those reasons, and up to 80 hours, or again, 2 weeks for a part-timer. The employer can then obtain a full tax credit against the wages that it paid for the employee. For the second 3 reasons, the employer has to pay at least 2/3 of the employee's wages, and again, can get a full tax credit against those wages that are paid. So while you're funding it, you are able to get a tax credit against your payroll taxes when you pay them quarterly. There is the Act does provide for a small business exemption, which is any employer with less than 50 employees. And so you'll see in the slide, it says CFAQ number 58. This is another important document that I think you ought to have. The Department of Labor published frequently asked questions that have 59 or 60 different questions that have come up with respect to this Act. And it's just a great resource. Take a look at FAQ number 58. The small business exemption is only a very narrow exemption, and it's a fairly rigorous standard. So if you believe you meet that standard, what the Department of Labor recommends is that you document how you meet that exemption. But again, it's a narrow exemption. It only exempts you from one of the 6 reasons why somebody might take paid sick leave, and it would exempt you from the FMLA as well. So that's the 2 main points in a nutshell. There's a lot, to each one, and we're happy to take questions.
Okay, great. Thanks, Nick. And thank you to all of our panelists. I mean, we've really stuffed a lot of good information in here. So I'm going to jump to the question and answer. I'm going to start throwing these out. I'll try to direct them to panelists, but anyone can jump in. And I'll just say to our panelists, try to give informative but short answers so we can get through as many of these as possible. Nick, maybe let me start with you. In looking at the payroll paid sick leave, I know it mentions quarantine on there. Does that include if a business cannot be open because of state restrictions based on the pandemic?
No, the prevailing view on that, Garrett, is that that does not constitute an isolation order or a local quarantine order by the state or federal government. So the prevailing view on that is that that would not constitute a reason for paid sick leave under the Act.
Great, thank you. Let's see what other questions we have here. This one's for Jackie. If you secure a match, is there still the requirement of submitting a copy of the check prior to the great give, and is there a minimum amount for match?
Yes, so for a match to count toward the community foundation's matches as well, it has to be at least $500. We have to get a copy of the check and a letter from or an email from the donor that says they want it used as a match, and the organization has to put it up. If you go to our frequently asked questions on the website, all of the details are there. If someone has a match smaller than that, they're welcome to put it up, and it will incentivize donors, but it won't count toward our matches and prizes.
Okay, great, thank you. Joe and Amber, you can jump on this one. This is about, do you know when the loan applicant would know if the loan is forgivable? I think probably going to the Paycheck Protection Program there that they're asking about, and it's forgivable if they meet the requirements.
That is actually correct, and it's based not by the SBA, it's the actual lender makes that determination.
Okay, definitely very important if you are going to take advantage of that program before you sign on for the loan, and if you're thinking it's going to be a grant, you want to be very clear on what those conditions are for it to convert to a grant. Question here, is there any help available for a 501c7?
Good question.
Good question. I'll have to get back to you on that one.
Okay. Yeah, there are variations in the different C designations. C3s are definitely included. For instance, I know the Chamber, we're a C6. We are not in all of these programs. Can you take advantage of the PPP if you don't lay anyone off? And the answer for that is definitely yes. Let's see. Is it 8 weeks? Is it 8 weeks from the date of the application submission? So again, I think we're talking about the Paycheck Protection Program. Joe or Amber, you want to jump on that?
Yeah, when you apply for the PPP, it basically gives you a timeline when you're bringing them back. So what the qualification is 8 weeks prior to February 15th that they were employed. And then since that time, you do apply, you get approved, and you bring your employees back. As long as you keep them for an additional 8 weeks, which is what the PPP is actually covering, then you will make one of the qualifications, and you've paid them more than 75% of their original salary before coronavirus, you will be eligible for it to return your loan into an actual grant.
Question here, can you get both the PPP and the Economic Injury Disaster Loan? The answer is yes to that, although you won't get the a double grant from the EIDL and the PPP. Those will be combined. But off of that, let me ask this question. Is there a better time to apply for the EIDL? For instance, I can just take the Chamber. I mean, March actually was not that bad of a month. Most people had already sent in their renewal dues, but we do expect, in June, July, or excuse me, in April and May, for that to possibly fall off a cliff. Are they looking at how you most recently did, or should you wait a little bit longer till you really start to feel some of those economic impacts?
No, they're actually, when you sit with your underwriter and have that discussion with them, they're looking at historical, present, right before the February 1st date when it was officially announced, and then looking toward their future. So they're going to ask you for interim financials. And from the interim financials, it will tell them what the future position based on last year's, for you, how was your membership last year? Now, how has it significantly impacted you, and what's the difference? And how can we mitigate that through the use of EIDL or the PPP?
Right. Let's see what else we have here. This question, I mean, Amber, you can take this. Is there a certain portion of the EIDL advance this specifically for nonprofits?
Is there a certain amount available for them?
I think they're just asking if it's designated out, which I don't believe so. I think you're
No, so the advances are available for any small business.
Let's see. For booking staff time. Sorry, I'm reading some of these live as I'm reading them. Booking staff time to this PPP loan. Can we start with the March payroll, or can we start only with the date the loan is received? Let's see. Can we start with the loan? I guess when can you start with the 8-week payroll is I guess the best way I understand it.
When you bring them back. So if you furlough to lay them off, the PPP is allowing you to bring them back to a status of full-time, part-time, wherever they were working, their schedule, for you to operate your business. But you then must keep them for the duration of a continuation of another 2 months.
Nick, while we're talking through that, what are some of the logistics of actually bringing people back if you had to let them go?
That's a good question. I mean, it sort of depends on whether or not you furloughed them or you actually laid them off and separated employment. Let's take the situation where somebody's furloughed. In essence, they are still an employee of the organization, and you'd want to check that your benefits would continue during the period of that furlough. For example, health insurance benefits. And if the person's just on furlough status, it's easy. They just come right back to work. If they were laid off, you actually separated employment, then it's up to each employer as to how they would effectively rehire an employee back into the workforce.
A question of clarification on the application process for the PPP. The person here is asking if they just download the application from the SBA website and then give it to a lender. Joe or Amber, I'll let you take that. Again, this kind of details that we're all learning on the fly.
Yes, you could download the application and you were to talk to one of your participating lenders that you have a relationship with directly. You can start doing that as of tomorrow.
Yeah, as we talk about things you can be doing right now while you're waiting, definitely work through the application. Questions you can ask yourself: are you eligible? Which programs are you eligible for? What type of information do you need to gather? Because there is a lot of documentation that goes along with each of these loans, so you can make it a much more efficient process for yourself if you start identifying those documents. You can do that by going through the application. How much do you want to borrow? How much can you borrow? That's a good question to start calculating based off of your payroll, rent, utilities, other expenses. And then understanding, as we mentioned, the loan forgiveness parameters. We've got more questions, so let me start running through some of these. This is a interesting question here. Do you have to rehire the same people, or does it just have to be returned to the same level of FTEs?
I believe it's just the same level.
This is your opportunity to change all the personalities if you want. No.
Start fresh. Here we go.
Yeah, sorry to joke. It's such a dire time, but yes. Let's see. For-profit. This is a question for a for-profit. Can a business set up as an LLC partnership with only the two founders and then still be eligible for PPP?
There are consolidation rules. So if you are one owner and you have multiple businesses, there's consolidation rules that go a little bit beyond this conversation. So that's definitely something to consider before you apply, understanding what those rules are.
Okay. Lots of questions about if the slides will be available. Yes, we'll try and make those available, but even more importantly, we'll have a recording of this webinar on our website later today. We now have a webinars page when you go right to the GNHCC website, or if you go to the Quinnipiac website as well. Does the PPP apply to a 501c3 that only has 1099 consultants and no W-2 employees?
Yes, I'm looking at a document right now that says Forms 1099 miscellaneous for self-employed individuals. So I think they will be able to do that. That is part of the documentation. I just happened to read over the PPP that was sent to me. And in the documentation rules, they're checking the last 4 quarters of your payroll, verification of your employees, and Forms 1099 for miscellaneous self-employees. So all your subcontractors that you have 1099, that is the proof of the PPP, so you can apply. When the banks are requiring that document, that's one of the forms that you will need.
That's great news. I think that's new clarification that came out, I think.
Yeah. It's just, I'm just looking, I'm like, well, okay, and the question came up.
Great.
I think a lot of the application documents are built around the for-profit companies. So a question here, I guess on one of the applications it asks for the listing of the owner. What should nonprofits do when going through that part? I assume they'll be working through a loan officer and that will probably be taken care of, but any thoughts?
I'm suggesting that they mark it NA. I did walk through a client through the EI LD. I just messed that person up. I walked through the application yesterday and it did not allow them to put NA. So she did put the executive director's name, and then they'll be able to talk that through the loan officer once they get there, because in the beginning application, it did say nonprofit 501c3. So the loan officer will understand that you don't have an owner. But if you're filing it electronically on the SBA.gov, it won't let you leave it blank or press NA to continue. So you will have to put a name.
Okay. Question here about the $100,000 salary limit. How do you go about entering that? How does that work? Anyone who can answer the mechanics on that?
Dealing with the actual limit, I'm trying to understand exactly what question they're asking.
Yes, so I understand, if I can interpret here, that you're not going to be able to be reimbursed on the grant side if someone's making over $100,000, but the first $100,000 is included. Is that a correct way to say it, Joe?
Yeah, that's debatable right now. That question it came up, and even if Julio didn't have an answer for it. So where the act is written plainly, if you make more than 100,000, it actually disqualifies you. So it's dealing only up to 100,000. So executives or higher level management that are making more than that, it's not going to apply to them. It's going to apply to the other workers that are making less than 100,000. I posed the question, which I still haven't got answered, and said, well, what about they took a pay cut as far as the executives? And because the rule is going back 1 year based on your 2019 and 4 quarters, you only have to pay 75% of my salary. So I can calculate that, and that's what we're trying to get clarification. So I'll definitely give a reminder to SBA to get an answer from them.
Nick, any thoughts on that?
No, I mean, it's actually refreshing to hear that there's some confusion on that, because I was under the impression it was up to 100. You could apply toward the loan that you're getting. So it'll be good to get clarification on that. So.
Great. Another question of clarification here. So if you take the PPP loan, convert it to a grant, did not lay anyone off, but now let's say, economic conditions do not improve in July or August, and maybe there's another stimulus package at that point, but you are forced to do layoffs. Are you still able to do that? Or have you been kind of locked out because you took the grant?
Know that the grant portion of the PPP is not going to be immediate. You don't even qualify until 2 months even after. So let's say you apply in April, you receive it by the end of April. You have all of May, you have all of June, and now in July, the economy takes a real dive, and you close and you furlough or lay them off again. That actually will probably disqualify you from converting the loan into a grant, because the PPP is really not a grant. It is a loan that can be forgivable if you meet all the criteria. And from the lenders, when the call I was on, they're basically waiting several months, 90 to 4 months minimum, to make the determination whether or not they're converting that into an actual grant.
So again, really important before you sign for this, I definitely apply, but before you sign off on this loan, you want to make sure that you feel like you can comply with the parameters that are going to be on converting that to a grant, because it's going to be a big consideration as you're looking at your nonprofit or your business as to how it's going to work. I think we've covered most of the questions. I know there's a few more out there. Feel free to send them to me, but I want to thank all of our panelists and give each of them a last word. So Jackie, I'll start with you. And I noticed you said on the chat that Community Foundation will have folks who can work with the nonprofit community as far as applying through these grants.
That's right. We're going to be offering some support. We have some nonprofit partners who are very skilled at loan applications and these type of grant applications, and they are willing to work with other nonprofits to help them complete them. So it's also new, it's all fresh. if it runs through me, give me a call, or not call, email me, and I will be able to find a partner to work with you.
Great. Thank you so much. Allie, I know you said that right now the fund that is through United Way and the Community Foundation is just for partners that you've already worked with. But if there are other nonprofits out there that feel like they have a significant need, is there anything they should do? Should they write that up, send that to you? What would you suggest at this point?
Would definitely encourage, talk to Community Foundation, talk to United Way, talk to your board, really look at who you can reach out to. There are a lot of resources. There are a lot of folks wanting to contribute. I get calls and emails and messages every day about like, how can I help? How can I support? So it's really like trying to talk to as many folks as you can, and definitely stay up to date on our giving, on our process, and reach out to us if you have questions. And we're also trying to be dot connectors of both resources, people, skills, talents, to try and do that in as many ways as we can as well. So
great, thank you. Amber, any advice you'd want to leave everyone with as they start to navigate this process of applications?
Sure. I would say just keep listening to the information that's getting disseminated to you. I know it can be overwhelming, but just in this last hour, I've heard even new information, and I'm staying on top of it as much as I can. Things like the salary limit for 100,000, whether it's disqualified for over 100,000 or disqualified altogether. That information keeps changing, and other pieces keep changing as well as we get more clarification. This kind of information that keeps getting passed down generally takes months for them to get through, and they're trying to make decisions as quickly as possible. So that's why some of the information isn't as clear as we would like it to be. So while your inboxes might be getting inundated with co-void information, I would say just keep reading it and keep checking it, and pick maybe 1 or 2 sites to keep going back to those sites to check for information. I know our website, we're constantly updating information that we learn.
Great, thank you. Joe, yeah, I know you're getting information as it comes out.
Yeah, thanks, Garrett. For everyone, go to our website. It's ctsbdc.com. We have a business resource center. This is where the entire collection, that everything coming out of Washington and the SBA, we just uploaded the site this morning. So the latest information as of 7:30 this morning is actually on our website. So everything from DOL, PPP questions, the EIDL, the loan, the grant, everything that's out of Washington as of 7:30 this morning is on our website at ctsbdc.com. We continue to update that website as soon as we get the information. We have staff on board and we upload it as soon as we get it.
Great, thanks a lot. Nick, I know we haven't even answered all the questions that have been posed to us today. So this is a really treacherous area for anyone trying to lead an organization, and you're walking on a tight wire because your funding is starting to run low. You just don't know what the future looks like. What type of advice would you leave people with today?
Well, so it's really difficult, and I think Amber really summed up everything I would say. Right now, the amount of information that's coming out, it's like drinking water from a fire hose. I mean, it's a lot, and I would say pick your resources. Pick the websites. The SBA website's a great website for information about the entire CARES Act and certainly the loan program. And find another website that provides the resources you need. We have a lot of information on our website. Just do the best you can to stay updated and be guided by your good common sense, and a lot of it will hopefully carry you through.
Great, thanks a lot, Nick. Tom, we'll close out with you, and I know we gave you kind of short shrift today, but as we're talking about all these complicated issues, really clear communication with board members and getting accurate information to board members, and then official decisions from them is going to be critical as you're navigating these waters.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity. And I was glad to sit back and listen to everyone else, frankly. This has been very instructive. But now more than ever in these times of uncertainty, it's going to be of paramount importance for boards and the organizations to work hand in glove to develop a comprehensive strategy for, among other things, interacting with their donors. It's going to be very important that the messaging acknowledge the COVID-19 pandemic and talk about how the value proposition for your nonprofit is being modified to meet the challenges presented to you in delivering your mission. And I think we will be having a webinar about that, hopefully, in the next 2 weeks, that will really drill down into some of the strategies and the practical approaches that you can take in accomplishing that. So thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Tom. And obviously, communication is everything. You don't want to get outside of where your board is, and you want to make sure that you have their support as you make these decisions. So we appreciate all of our panelists being with us. We know it's an extremely difficult time. I know some people may even leave this frustrated because they did not get all the answers they have in their minds answered, but stay with it. Frankly, just not all of the answers are out there yet. And so you really need to work closely with people you trust. The nice thing with this program that's coming out tomorrow is you will be working with a loan officer, either through a SBA or affiliated organization or through a bank. Really ask a lot of questions before you sign off on anything. Make sure you get the answers that you need to have. I want to thank the Nonprofit Resource Council, specifically our steering committee and Betsy and everyone who helped put this together. Mosaic, our sponsor of the Nonprofit Resource Council. We'll have a lot more information, and again, the recording of all of this, and we'll have the slides up there too, will be on the GNHCC website. More webinars to come. Everyone stay safe, and thank you again. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Be well.
Thanks, guys.